the culture of a company is something that makes you feel that you belong in one place. And for Evan and I, it was true that from the beginning, we were friends. I'm not saying that's the formula for everybody, but that worked for us. And that was at the root of the culture of the company. So people that join could feel that. Working with the team feels like there is an underlying friendship dynamic as well, in part probably because that comes from the beginning as one of the root values, even if it's not one of our values, one of the ways that we communicate and talk to each other and connect. So I would say that has transmitted through osmosis through the company.
Hi, and welcome to Minimum Viable Podcast, where we go beyond the surface to explore the depths of product creation. Think of this as a masterclass in innovation, combining deep insights, perspectives, hands-on analysis, where we'll cover topics like the psychology of user behavior and the aesthetics of design and the timeless principles of storytelling. I'm your host, Elliot Popple, and the founder of General Collaboration. General Collaboration is a cross-app inbox for all of your comments from all of the tools that you use at work. So that way, you'll always be focused on what needs your attention most. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Evan, Maveric, thank you so much for joining today. CEO, CPO of Getro. It's great to meet you both. I only know Getro a little bit. I know you because you guys powered the Precursor Ventures job board, and I'm a Precursor portfolio company. We actually had Charles Hudson on the podcast a few weeks ago. So thanks for helping me leverage the Precursor network to hire. That's probably a good place to start. Evan, maybe you can start by introducing yourself and the company, and then Maverick, we can get your introduction next.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. So I'm the CEO and co-founder with Maverick here of Getro. We started the business about 7 years ago. Before that, we were running a recruiting agency together and just learned lots of the issues that come with trying to find a job and trying to hire. And we got really excited about how we could scale the support we were giving to the world through technology. So ended up starting Getro. And over the last 7 years, we've really evolved into a network management platform, mostly for venture capital funds and private equity funds to help them make better introductions for their portfolio companies. So we have some features that can aggregate all the open jobs from a portfolio of companies in one place. So we power those job boards for hundreds of venture funds and PE funds and other kinds of customers too. And then we also have a set of features that helps with network management. So bringing in all of your contacts, your warm network into one place and helping VCs make intros around things like hiring and business development, kind of sales opportunities for their portfolio.
And then, so Maverick, when you joined, or rather you co-founded this together, were these roles set? So Maverick, you're the chief product officer. Did you come into it knowing you were the product guy and Evan was going to be CEO and whatever flavor of CEO that was going to mean?
Yeah, as you imagine, at the beginning, it was two of us. So we were doing anything that we needed to do. One thing that Evan and I always thought about is if there is a ball that is falling into the court, if we have both go to get it, we'll both go, even if we have to butt heads, but we'll make sure that the ball doesn't fall outside of the court. That's Evan's background comes from sales. My background comes from engineering. So it was naturally, there were some balls that Evan was more appropriate to take than myself, and the same on my side.
So I hear you two have a pretty unique relationship of growth and product together. So take me back to where it all began. Like, how did you decide to start working together in this way? Besides that, I love that metaphor of if the ball falls in, both go for it and figure it out. But how did this relationship start? How did you guys kind of set the initial terms?
At the beginning, it was even without working together, playing ping pong in the same house that we both were living. Evan and I share a house for 2 years, and Evan has had his own company. I had my own company, and we discovered through playing ping pong that we just love talking to each other and that we love solving problems. So I think something unique about us is that when we are together, we just talk and talk and talk and talk. And often we mix from professional to work, and we intertwine the two, and it's never boring. And that was true before starting working together, and then working together at Rework, which is the company that Evan co-founded and he mentioned I was living in the US for 4 years, but then just a short story there. My visa expired, so then I went back to Spain, but I had never worked there. And it was a little bit different of a market, right? So I ended up joining Rework, which was the company that Evan co-founded as the CTO there. And then we co-founded this company together. So it was a natural process of talking about anything and everything, figuring out like the things that we like to do that gives us energy. And through that, it just emerged a little bit. That said, we are always communicating, trying to make sure that we are clear with each other. What would you add, Evan? Well,
just that I think like because we had experience working together, there was less unknowns than if you were two co-founders trying to start a company who had never worked together. So we de-risked that a little bit because when Maverick joined the Rework, the recruiting agency, we were starting to build technology at that company. So we got some time to work together. Even before that, he had just like built some prototypes for us just as friends and helping us out. So it wasn't a cold start in our working relationship. And I think it's a fortunate thing when you have time to get to know someone outside of the context of going all in on a new startup together. I talked to other friends who are like looking for co-founders and feeling the risk of having to just jump in with 2 feet. And I always kind of recommend like if you can do a project together or somehow get a chance to just see how you handle stress and uncertainty and before doing that leap, it's you could just learn a lot really fast, and it's hard. It's like higher risk to do that if you just go all in from the beginning.
So there's this meme, and I'm sure you both have heard it too, about the differences between product teams and growth teams. And I know, Evan, you've got a more growth mindset, with a sales background. Maverick, you've got more of a product background, a product mindset. Growth always being focused on acquisition, product being focused on more engagement, retention, short-term goals versus long-term goals. So maybe to start, is that tension real? Was that something you guys experienced?
It definitely was, but I would say maybe even more the tension for us comes from both Maverick and I loving product and loving growth.
Okay.
Like there's definitely been tension. Our roles tend to be my focus more on growth and Maverick's focus more on product and engineering. So we've had some tension where in moments where we've both overlapped interests and wanted to be involved in each other's areas. And then we've had also tension in the past, like, do we want to be more sales led? Do we want to be more product led? And how do we make those choices? Maybe that's two separate categories of things, but I think in a way, if Maverick was only interested in product engineering and I was only interested in growth, sometimes I think that would be easier, or at least now we've found ways of navigating that. But in the past, there's been moments where we're like, is this my job? Is this your job? How do we figure this out when there's, the team's very small and everything needs to get done?
How did you navigate those decisions of who was going to own what when you both had those same interests?
At one point, we were using a pen.
Yeah.
How so? Like spinning the pen or something?
That's a good story, actually. Maybe to tell a story about Techstars Maverick with the pen.
Yeah, we went through Techstars in Boulder, Colorado, and while we were there, obviously we were working a ton and together on everything. But even some calls, excuse me, not on calls. I'm just saying calls because I don't even remember what is in person anymore. In that prehistory, when we were actually in person, we used to have meetings, and sometimes he was running a meeting with an advisor, and we figured that if it was clear who was owning the meeting, then it was much easier and it was more in flow. So we would use a pen to
You'd be like passing the baton back and forth under the table.
Yeah. All right. I have the control of the meeting right now. Okay, now you take the control, or like you take it from me. But it's always clear who is owning that. In that way, it was way easier to manage the meetings in person. We don't have the pen right now, but we figure out different ways.
Did anybody ever pick up on that in the meetings and be like, what the hell are you guys doing under the table there?
Probably our managing director picked up on it, which is maybe even how we came up with this concept. Because I think before that, we were just kind of like jumping in and stepping on each other's toes and getting confused and getting frustrated afterward. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but I'm sure Natty Zola, who's actually now runs a venture fund called Matchstick Ventures and is one of our investors at that time, was the managing director of our program, was kind of like sat down with us. It's like, all right, guys, like what's going on here? How do we like navigate this? You guys need to like figure out how to both collaborate without stepping on each other's toes. I don't think it wasn't so in a meeting like passing it back and forth. It just became natural. But what I think the learning was that as long as somebody is clearly running the meeting, we were both totally fine with that. The tension came from not knowing who was supposed to be running the meeting. So we would both be kind of like jumping in, and it's like the start stop thing. And I think that that's also just carried forward since then. The idea of like, some people use RACI, as a way of making decisions, or there's like lots of different ways of structuring org design as a startup. But the bottom line is just like, who is ultimately responsible for this thing? And sometimes it doesn't even necessarily matter what the thing is. It's just knowing you can let your mind rest because somebody else has it. You can turn around and do something else instead of everyone having to do everything. It's just like too much cognitive load and ends up wasting time.
So how did the pen evolve over time? Did it eventually make its way into being RACI or something like that for you guys? Or what did you graduate to and what are you using now?
I mean, I don't know how it's so interesting to do this podcast together because we just haven't really retroed a lot of the stuff. So it's kind of funny to hear what comes up. But what I would say, and I'm so curious, Maverick, to hear what your thoughts, but what I would say is like over the last 7 years, we've had times in the company that have felt like everything's getting pulled away from us and we don't really have time to like debate and argue and nitpick things. And we've had other times where the company's moving slower and it's unclear which direction we're going in and there's more frustration. In the times where everything's moving really fast, I just noticed some of these problems kind of melt away because it's like we don't have time to get into the weeds of everything. And then when things are more unclear in those times, I've noticed that it's like people can kind of like nip at each other's heels or get involved in each other's things, or trust can break down. And I think that just comes from the anxiety of, this thing doesn't seem like it's working as well as we want it to. Like, what's wrong? That's what I've noticed. But Maverick, I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also, I think we've implemented some things, for example, define areas and functions, whereas at the beginning there were no areas or no functions. So there is areas of responsibilities and also, when we together have a lot of clarity for where we are going, and we just like, hey, this is it, then everything is more smooth. When it's not as clear, then we go back and forth, making sure that is we can deplore all that. And then also we started working with an executive coach that was very helpful and helped us understand what are the different kind of decisions. Sometimes it's product decision, a growth decision, a co-founder decision. Trying to label those sometimes is helpful as well.
I'd love to hear about the executive coach experience. So that's something I've been playing around with, thinking, is that something I'd be interested in personally? Do you guys do that together? Do you do that separately as well? How's that work for you?
We do it together. We started working with a guy named John Barrett, who's just an incredible, kind of legendary coach. He's been doing coaching for, I don't even know how long, probably 30 or 40 years. And he's great. We've been working with him for, I guess, maybe 3 years now, and we take the calls together. And so we set an agenda, and I think what's valuable about it is that we try to pick problems where like there's specific tension between Maverick and I for some reason. So it's kind of like a way to just let the tension out in that space. And he's really good at making sure that both of us feel really heard, and that, it's just kind of like a facilitator of conversations. And I think actually when we're in person, I think it's much easier. Like we don't often need a facilitator because we can just like feel each other's energy and we have enough time to let the conversation happen. But I noticed that in the remote world, when you have these like 30-minute or an hour time chunks and like you're on Zoom, it's just hard to really connect. So it's been super valuable for moments like that, for sure.
Super cool. I'd love to hear more about, so coming up with a shared vision together and how you two partner together, because product strategy, growth strategy can at times feel at odds. Well, how have you guys done that? What's been your code for working together?
I mean, I'm kind of thinking of the even just talking about the product roadmap, it's evolved a lot over the years. So we have 17 people at the company today. I think as we've grown, we've gone from being myself, Maverick, and, 2 engineers and an operations person who's just helping us with everything. And that's a very, very small team. So you don't really need a lot of structure and process and kind of like rituals around it. It's just like, it's a little more obvious and you can just talk through everything. As the team grew, we started creating more roles and more structure, and you need a little bit more process for things to make sense and so that everybody can be autonomous. And so I think like early on, we just talked about everything. Now it's like a lot more structured. Like there's a product roadmap. We're writing product requirement documents. Like we're sitting down and talking about features and what we're building together. Like we loop in other team members, like our customer success lead, our sales lead, to ask for their feedback. We try to talk to customers as much as possible. Like, I mean, in a way, if you have a big debate, like ideally you can get that debate broken by just prototyping something or going and getting a bunch of feedback from your customers. So we try not to waste too much time. Well, I should say just like we try not to spend too much time in debate mode. And we just tried to like learn together and be like, okay, if we're talking about this over and over and over, like how do we squash this by just going and putting it in front of a bunch of customers and letting them be the tiebreaker? That's a mechanism I think we use a lot. Oh yeah. Yeah, maybe Maverick, you could talk about the kind of like our Lighthouse customer program, just like how we've done prototyping.
Yeah. For example, right now, what we are doing is we want to develop X because customers have a problem. We design the Figma prototypes, and then we get together with a few customers. We cannot get together with all of them. We would love to, but there is a few who we work quite closely with, and even we have them in Slack. So then we show them those prototypes, they give us feedback, and then we iterate on those feedback. If we feel confident, then we go and build it. That would be one way in which we standardize that process. Also, there is small things here and there about like sometimes, as you know, there is small things that are necessary pain. Like sometimes you need to do like a one-off because there is a very important customer that requires X in order to stay. You could say that that's more of a sales-led strategy, right? There is a time and a place for that. So, for example, what we are doing, I hate those decisions, by the way. Like, anytime that I need to make a decision on off, I'm like, I really don't want to do it, but I understand why. So right now, what I'm just doing is like, hey, Evan, I'm just presenting to you the one-off that I'm asked for. I need your help making a decision here. So I utilize Evan in that regard because, you know, there is lots of trade-offs, and I've just found that is a really easy way to just help us move forward. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make a huge difference for the product strategy, you know. I care more about other things that help us create a product that would be scalable for everybody. So for that, I just tend to delegate in a way to Evan, which is very helpful making those decisions and has that context for all the customers.
I mean, it's funny. My mind also went there immediately, Maverick, like, because I think it's been, from the beginning, it's always been really hard to, it's like on one hand, you want to do everything for everybody because you're a startup and you don't know what's going to work yet. And so you just want to, anyone who wants to come pay you for anything, you're like, yeah, we should do that. Like, we should learn about that. And maybe that ends up creating a pathway that grows into the thing. It's like, if you haven't found the thing yet, you're just always looking for the thing. So you want to be trying new things, but in a way that also creates so many paper cuts that you end up just building a mediocre thing for 100 different people instead of building one thing that works really well that can then grow and scale. And I think I was probably looking at like the sales versus product hats dynamic that we've been talking about. I think I had a lot less experience than Maverick coming into this company of any kind of product and engineering. Like, it was the first time that I had been running a technology startup. So that idea of technical debt or building lots of one-offs and how distracting that can be for an engineering team. Like I just didn't have a lot of empathy with that. And so to me, it just made a lot of sense. Like, yeah, just build the thing that's making money. Like, why are we even debating this? And Maverick's kind of like, all right, man, but if we do that, then we're not really going to be able to like grow anything. And so we've had these kind of like come to Jesus moments in the history of the company to say, okay, we have to completely focus on this one user. And even if we have customers in other segments, we have to say no to new things. And then other times in the company where we say, okay, it's time to try to widen the aperture and increase the addressable market that we can work with. And so now it's like, let's open up again. And it's just there's always a lot of debate around that. And even like within a customer segment, you have one-off requests from a specific customer who wants to do something, and you have to decide you want to prioritize that. And then even across customer segments, you have requests. So there's, this is in a way the job of the kind of like product management function to figure out how to prioritize. But I think oftentimes if the product team is trying to run product led, you're prioritizing that based on, what the majority of your most valuable customers want, more or less, or maybe something strategic. But if you have a growth team or a CEO who's like pulling you in all these directions, then that creates a lot of tension. And we've had to work on that dynamic. I think I've seen the light on that more or less now, but it took a while. Maverick was very patient with me.
It sounds like there's a bit of a call it like wartime co-founders versus peacetime co-founders dynamic, where your relationship seems to have jumped back and forth between these two zones quite a bit and adapt based on the situation you're in. Am I reading those tea leaves right? Does that seem like a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I think the wartime peacetime is a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, I think any company that's been operating, like you have a lot of companies over the last 5 years with just the COVID and the interest rate market dynamics and all this. It's like some companies just did really, really well because of one of those dynamics. A lot of companies just ended up failing. And then you have some companies that have been able to figure out how to ride these waves. Any company that's in that bucket has just been through so much back and forth. And it just takes a lot of resilience to stay on the surfboard with like all of the choppy waves. And, everybody's got war stories from these last 5 years. I think it's made us more resilient entrepreneurs. It ends up being a mirror to ourselves to just kind of be like, why is this actually pissing me off? Like, what is behind this? What's inside of me that's making me feel this way, and trying to even like do our own personal work to figure that out and not just like project those things on each other. Cause everybody's personal lives have always been hard during this time too. So that's been, I'm grateful that Maverick and I had a strong friendship before getting into this. Cause I think if we hadn't had that, there's moments that there was a lot of tension and we fell back on the friendship to be like, okay, well, like this is our priority. How do we fix the company thing? But let's try to like create a little bit of distance there so we can look at it together and not just be like in the weeds of, these problems.
It's also so fortunate. So not in this startup, but in my previous startup, I also co-founded with one of my best friends, still is one of my best friends. And I was recently telling this story to someone else who was in the process of doing that like co-founder dating thing that's become so popular these days. And he was like, oh, I read you're not supposed to do that. I was like, what do you mean you're not supposed to? Like, do whatever the heck you want to do. It worked for us. I'm not saying it would work for you, but you do hear a lot of like, how have you guys maintained the friendship? I know it was a challenge for me and my previous co-founder, Kevin. How did you guys keep strong? Especially, you guys were founding during a chaotic
I just
time.
don't know. I don't know how you do it without that. Like, will you marry someone who is not your friend? You are literally spending so much time with this person, probably the person you're spending the most time with. Are you gonna marry someone who is not your friend? Hell no.
Yeah.
Hell no. I just don't know any other way of doing it, honestly. And I think you need to separate. This is work, this is friendship. Those are two different things. It's not personal. When I'm giving feedback about something that is company related, this is about the company. It's not about you as a human being. Those things need to be separate, 100%. But like, how can you do a company? How can you co-fund something without being a friend? Like that's the first thing that I would have to validate with the person that I'm starting a company with.
Yeah, like values alignment, motivations, like kind of like purpose, how you behave under stress, your ethical and moral code. Like those are the things that have nothing to do with like the startup that you're building and have more to do with like how you live your life. So I think, and that's also, I think, what the basis of lots of friendships are. It's like we see the world in a similar way and we want to be like walking next to each other on this path in some way, shape, or form. So, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to go be friends with someone for 5 years before you start a company. But if you don't have alignment on those basic things, then, it's like all good to get excited about a problem in the world and want to solve problems and go build something. But the truth is that every single company, if you work on it long enough, runs into critical challenges that create pressure and tension, and everybody cracks somewhere. And I think we especially saw that with COVID, of like, no matter how chill you are, no matter how balanced you are, like you're going to crack somewhere, And so can you like hold yourself through that? Do you have like the patience and the thoughtfulness and compassion to hold someone else through that? Like, those are, I think, the things you want to try to figure out before you build a company with someone. We've also really tried to. So we were remote from the beginning. Actually, we didn't become remote during COVID, and so we had, I think, a big leg up from a lot of companies that just like had to do that, and we already have all of those rituals in place. And one of the things that we try to do as much as possible, even though we live in different places, Maverick lives in Squamish in British Columbia, and I live in New York City, but we try to get together ideally at least once a quarter. And we haven't always done that, but more or less through the history of the company, we've tried to do that just to touch base and like see the human, it's like, okay, we're both like real people, and it's easy to get caught up in the work problems or just problem solving. You shut your computer and you're like back in your world and that person's not there. So I think it's, for me at least, it's important to have some degree of in-person connection on a semi-regular basis, and that fills the cup of the friendship also, because you just have that like wasting time together, traveling around, going on a hike, doing things that are not just work. I think the times when we've forgotten to invest in that have been the hardest times for us, and the times when we have really made it a priority or we've gone and done something like that, it gives us more energy and it just makes us kind of feel like, these problems aren't really that bad, or it's easier to not take something personally because you can feel that someone really cares when they're giving the feedback. That's really cool. That idea of going on, like carving out the time to go on trips together like that. Are they work trips? Are they like friend trips? How much are the laptops open? How much are you at the whiteboard during these trips?
Yeah, I think that connects to the beginning. Like when we are together, it's just, we were talking about work because when we were playing ping pong, we were doing both. We're playing ping pong because we like ping pong and we like to play games. And also we were talking about work because we both like it. We don't work because we have to. We work because we like it. So when we do trips together, it's the same thing. There was one, I forget the year, but we were remote and we could be anywhere. And we decided to go to Tarifa, which is a small town in the south of Spain. We were kite surfing there. We were
going on some cool trips.
We have. But we were kite surfing too. So I think that's true for any moment, like a segment of time, that even if it's just 1 hour, we'll probably do a little bit of both, unless it's just like very intense and we're just like working. Yeah, I think I kind of forget sometimes that we've been doing this now for so long. I mean, even with our first company, I was semi-remote. Maverick's been working remotely for probably 20 years almost, with like through your first companies. And so it's just so natural for us to like go take a trip somewhere, rent an Airbnb. At this point, we have so many like founders and friends that we've met along our international journeys that there's like people we can go stay with or touch base with. And it's just so natural to be doing that. I kind of forget that. I think because we've been doing that so long, there's not like the mental friction. And also we don't have kids, like we don't have families that we need to be kind of like co-located with. And so I think in this last chapter of our lives, we're fortunate that both of us had a similar
life dynamic that we could just be like, hey, let's go to Tarifa or go to Germany, or I come visit you in, Squamish, or come to New York. And we just kind of like set up shop. We're basically just co-working together as if we were working in the same way that we normally do. And then outside of work hours, we try to hang out or do things. But, it's kind of, I imagine it as like if we had an office in the same city, we treat it kind of like that. Like we're working in the way that we would be working on a normal day. And then we're just like doing stuff outside of that.
Montreal, spend another month in Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Maveric at the beginning didn't have a U.S. visa, so we had to leave the U.S. We came for Maverick came for Techstars, could be there for 6 months, but then we had to basically leave the U.S. So we just kind of like, Airbnb my place. We just like travel around for basically a year and a half. Yeah, that was good.
How has that, seems like a really important part of your founder relationship, your founder culture, how is that spilt over into the rest of the company? Are there anything that you're intentional about that's kind of rooted in that relationship that you guys have?
I think it's been a little bit organic, but for example, our designer is someone I went to university with. There is like all these connections from people that we've ended up working with. Some have been introductions. So I think, like the culture of a company is something where you feel that at the end of the day is something that makes you feel that you belong in one place. And for Evan and I, it was true that from the beginning, we were friends. I'm not saying that's the formula for everybody, but that worked for us. And that was at the root of the culture of the company. So people that joined could feel that. So I would say that working with some of the team working with the team feels like there is an underlying friendship dynamic as well, in part probably because that comes from the beginning as one of the root values, even if it's not one of our values, one of the ways that we communicate and talk to each other and connect. So I would say that has transmitted through osmosis through the company. I don't know if you agree or not, Evan.
Definitely. I mean, I definitely agree with that. And I was thinking about how someone said to me one time that a company is like startup is the bright spots and the shadows of the founders. And so the more that you kind of like work on being able to see your shadow, the more you can bring awareness to the challenging pieces. And, you can kind of like amplify the bright spots and be aware of the shadows. And I think examples of that for us, so like gratitude is a big value at the company. I think it's something that comes easily to Maverick and I, and something we've always really wanted to put forward. And we've actually done rituals within the company to try to kind of like make that more present. And I think it's something that's kind of in the DNA of the business. One of our other values is compassionate candor. And I think that came more from a shadow of noticing the people-pleasing parts of Maverick and I, and where we weren't having hard conversations at first. Like we weren't having hard conversations with each other. Team members then weren't having hard conversations. And we just kind of saw that dynamic perpetuating and tried to address that by doing the work ourselves, encouraging other people to do the work, making it a value, checking in on it on a regular basis. But even still, I'm sure that there are cultures that are way more like kind of assertively direct, we'll put it. Like, if we're going to lean toward being aggressive or lean toward being a little too kind of like soft and compassionate, I think our culture leans a little more soft and compassionate. And sometimes that's makes things take longer or creates confusion. And that's just like a thing that we've had to learn how to deal with as part of the fact that like, the personalities kind of permeate and that ends up being seen in the culture.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind me asking, so what did this relationship, it's clear you guys have a really special relationship as co-founders. What did this look like at its worst? How did you get there? How'd you get out of it?
Probably through one that comes to mind is when we started working with John.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
Right. Yeah. We didn't.
It was like the end of 2020.
Seems right.
but we went to San Francisco to meet him. So it wouldn't have been during COVID. It might have been 2021. I think
Who's
it was
John?
maybe John Baird's our executive coach.
Okay. When you started working with him.
Yeah. There was a point we had gotten to where we were so kind of like digging our heels into where we wanted to take the business. And I think we had also just raised, if I remember the timing right, we had just raised more money for the company. And we were both really excited about the future of the company, but also really afraid of, I'll speak for myself. I was feeling afraid that we may not be able to do what we wanted to do. And we just made these promises to investors, and I could see new competitors in the market. And I just felt like I was taking on a lot of pressure, and I also wasn't taking great care of myself. Like I wasn't working out as much. I didn't have a good therapist. So there was a lot of like mental health. I was trying to just push a lot, and it was not useful for me. And I think a lot of that was projected outward, like toward Maverick and other people on the team, or just toward myself. And it was challenging. And, you could speak to your experience, Maverick, but we kind of got to a place where we're like, this sucks. Like we have to fix this or else we're going to have to break up basically. And so we didn't want that. And so we ended up, a friend of mine who's also an investor in the company, recommended John as a coach. And we kind of met John. We both really liked John, and we're like, all right, let's like save this marriage. It's like kind of the same vibe of being like, we need to talk about this and we need help. And yeah, John came in and helped us figure out how to make our problems about like the vision and the direction and the strategy of the business. I remember we sat down with him for the first meeting, and the first question he asked was like, he was like pointed at Maverick. He's like, tell me the strategy of the company. And like Maverick said something, he points at me. He's like, tell me the strategy of the company. And I said something, and they were just like really different. And he was like, cool, this is the problem. He was like, how often do you guys talk about strategy? And we're like, I don't know. Like we couldn't answer the question. He's like, that's the problem. That's what we're going to talk about. We're like, oh shit, that's really smart.
So how do you talk about strategy now? That seems like a heck of a breakthrough coming out of your coach. How do you do that today?
I would say, and actually before I answer, I just want to point out for anyone who is listening, John Bear is part of Velocity Coaching. So if you are interested in looking for a good coach, I would recommend searching for Velocity Coaching. Edward Sullivan is the CEO, and he is awesome. Right now, what we do is we have conversations when it feels like it's needed, and especially when we need to talk with the team about it. For example, right now, we are having lots of conversations. Evan and I did a weekend. I couldn't say a hackathon because there wasn't a designer. What did you say?
It was like a sprint.
Like a sprint between him and I. Was like, okay, Saturday and Sunday we are going to connect 8 a.m. and we're going to work on these things that are related to the strategy of the company, and it gets a little bit more specific into the roadmap as well. So we saw the need and we decided to work on the weekend. We did that, and now we divided and conquered. So Evan is going to communicate that to the whole company, and I'm going to make sure that we execute on the roadmap.
Yeah, and I mean, like over time, I think we've both just learned what is actually important and what's not important, almost like what battles to fight. I don't think as a younger CEO and founder, anyone could have really told me that. You can read the advice, but you just got to feel the repetition of, you kind of like nitpick all these details and it doesn't end up really mattering that much, and you spend so much time on it. It's like every time I try to learn how to release the handlebars like more and just relax, it's always better. I feel like in 5 years, I'm going to look back and be like, wow, I was holding out so tight and I could have released so much more. So it's like the areas that you think are the most important aren't always the most important areas, and trying to figure out how to get real about that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's really like a silver bullet piece of advice that can help people see that. It's just like getting experience in the world of work and also in your particular business. Like when is it really necessary for you as a founder to get involved, and when is it better to not get involved unless someone fail, or just be really clear with someone on the team of like, if this doesn't get better by this period of time, we have to part ways. And it's not personal, it's just that this isn't a good fit. Knowing where to put pressure on that, it's one of the hardest things about our jobs, I think.
I'd love to hear any, sounds like you two are also experts at remote work, that you seem to crack the code there. You said you were doing it before it was popular, before it was a thing because of the pandemic. What do you think is key to your success there? I'd love to hear from two perspectives. One, the company overall, but also as remote co-founders. How do you guys manage that? That sounds really hard to me personally.
Yeah, honestly, the first thing that came to mind is like, I'm so biased that I struggle to answer that question because I just
You've been doing it a long time.
Doing it forever. I don't know what it is to work in person. I just love it so much. It's like a lifestyle. It's being proud of making remote work amazing is the level that it's at, right? Like it's not a constraint. It's actually a perk.
Hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking of that meme of like the two fish and the other fish swimming by each other, and the one's like, "How's the water?" and the other two are like, "What the hell's water?" And
What's
like,
water?
What's remote work?
I mean, that's actually something that, it's funny because some of the things that we've implemented, we've been doing them so long, it's even hard to know to talk about it. But one thing that came to mind for me is at one point we just made the decision, and this was pretty early on, maybe around like 2020 when more people started going remote. It's like we only want to hire people who have been working remotely and love it. And that's really important because like Maverick said, like some people see remote work as like, man, I know what it's like to not work remotely, and I know what it's like to work remotely, and I know how to do it. And I know it's better for me personally and my lifestyle. I'm self-motivated. I can get out every day, and that's just not like in the universe of problems. It's just not one of my problems, you know. If that is one of your problems, you should go work for a company that's co-located. It's just better. Like, don't smash your head against the wall trying to figure out remote. It's fine, you know. And especially early on, where like, if someone loves working remotely, they'll figure out all the problems. They'll get so passionate about it. They'll come up with new projects. That's like, hey, I noticed the team's not connecting that much. Let's do a summit, or let's use this tool where you can like, we have a tool called Hey Taco, where you just like make little tacos to say thank you to people. And it's like a little bit of gratitude. You know, like we didn't come up with that. Somebody on our team was like, hey, we should do this. I did it in my last company. It's good for connecting remotely. You know, like team members come up with ideas for summits or different kinds of, you know, what to do in the all hands. Like every all hands meeting, we usually start by taking 5 minutes at the beginning. We do breakout rooms and we just talk about what we're grateful for. Everybody just shares something they're grateful for. They connect as a little unit. Usually it's with people you don't work with day to day. So you get to just like say hi to somebody you don't usually say hi to. But we didn't come up with that. Somebody on the team came up with that, you know, because they just so that's like the hack really, is just finding people who love it, and then they solve the problems like everything else, and it's not all on your back. And that's something also as a founder, I think, that you start to feel as you grow a team, which is like, you don't have to do everything. People have good ideas, and if you just ask for help and vulnerably say like, I have no idea what to do on this, like, do you have any good ideas? It's just amazing what people come up with. And if I could like wave a magic wand and give myself more of that earlier, it's like, I wish that I had more awareness about that earlier on as a founder. I think I think I probably missed a lot of moments where people wanted to contribute, but because I didn't make it clear that was available, then it's just like, you know, they didn't feel comfortable enough plugging in.
Well, guys, this has been an awesome conversation. I know we set out to talk about like product versus growth, but this really took a really neat turn into, I love it.
You just never know, Elliot, where it's going to go.
It took a really cool turn into like really understanding the co-founder relationship and how to work together and how to work together remotely. And super appreciative that you two were able to share so much, be so vulnerable. Really, really appreciate it. Where can people follow you guys, follow Getro, if they want to stay in touch afterwards?
Probably LinkedIn's the best way for us, for both of us. Yeah, just kind of look us up, say hello. Yeah, we're happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking time to chat today. I really appreciate it. Great getting to know you, and looking forward to staying in touch with you guys.
Thank you so much, Elliot. Great question.
Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks. Bye.